She was known as the Quiet One. In a world dominated by clamor, loud voices, and ceaseless bravado, she stood apart, an enigma wrapped in calm. On the base, surrounded by the constant rhythm of boots on concrete and the drone of distant helicopters, she moved almost silently, blending into the background. Her presence wasn't commanding. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet undeniable to anyone who took the time to notice. She had always been this way. From childhood, she preferred observation to chatter, listening to the world carefully, noting details most people overlooked. That ability, seemingly ordinary, would one day become her greatest weapon. Every evening, she could be found in a corner of the armory, a place of quiet sanctuary where the scent of gun oil and polished metal lingered like a comforting fog. The routine was sacred, carefully disassembling her rifle, part by part, inspecting each component as if it held secrets only she could decipher. Her hands moved with precision, deliberate and unhurried, wiping, polishing, and reassembling with meticulous attention. To an outsider, it might have seemed like obsession, bordering on ritualistic behavior. To her, it was preparation, discipline, and reverence for her craft. The rifle wasn't merely a weapon. It was an extension of herself, a conduit through which focus, patience, and skill could manifest. Every scratch she smoothed, every pin she checked, every barrel she cleaned brought her closer to perfection. She didn't talk much about her past. Some assumed she was shy or socially awkward, but that wasn't the case. She simply valued silence, understanding that the world often said too much and listened too little. While others boasted about their achievements, she quietly pursued mastery. And in that pursuit, she found a kind of freedom that louder personalities could never comprehend. Around her, conversations would swirl with tales of exploits, bravado, and occasional exaggerations, yet she remained undisturbed. She observed, storing every gesture, every tone of voice, every flicker of reaction, like a secret inventory she could draw upon when it mattered most. Her discipline extended beyond the armory. She maintained physical conditioning that rivaled the most elite soldiers in her unit. Early mornings found her running alone along narrow dirt paths, calculating every stride, every breath, monitoring her pulse with meticulous attention. While others used morning exercises to socialize or display strength, she used it to refine endurance, control, and focus. Every movement had purpose. Every routine reinforced precision. Even in training drills, she appeared almost detached, moving efficiently without wasted effort, her gaze calm and unwavering. There was an aura of quiet competence that even the most seasoned soldiers couldn't ignore, though few understood its depth. She had earned respect in subtle ways, through deeds rather than declarations. Small victories accrued quietly, a perfectly executed tactical exercise, an unnoticed correction of a malfunctioning weapon, or an instinctively accurate estimation of distances during routine drills. These were not moments she flaunted. They were simply evidence of her relentless preparation. Slowly, a quiet legend began to form, though it was whispered rather than announced. Her colleagues noticed that when she moved, things were done efficiently, without the need for orders or explanations. Problems seemed to resolve themselves in her presence. And yet, she never sought recognition. The discipline was its own reward, and she carried it with an understated pride that was imperceptible to the casual observer. Despite her quiet demeanor, she possessed a keen awareness of human behavior. She could read subtle cues, a shift in stance, a twitch of the eye, a slight tremor in the hand, and interpret intent with unnerving accuracy. It was a skill she had honed over years of observation and solitude. Others might see a soldier adjusting her gear or staring off into the distance. She was calculating angles, wind patterns, and trajectories, even mentally simulating outcomes of scenarios that might never occur. Her mind was a laboratory of possibilities, where every observation was catalogued and analyzed for future application. Her solitude was not loneliness. She found camaraderie in shared purpose rather than conversation. She admired those who displayed courage, strategy, and resilience, even if she never verbally acknowledged it. And in return, a few sharp observers, those who valued results over rhetoric, recognized her potential. They saw the calm intensity in her eyes, the unwavering patience, and the quiet diligence. To them, it was clear she was different, but they weren't yet certain how extraordinary she could become. She also had an intimate understanding of her rifle. Every weapon carries personality, a rhythm, a set of subtle behaviors that reveal themselves only to the one who pays attention. She knew how her rifle reacted under varying conditions, how it handled humidity, how the metal expanded under heat, and how vibrations traveled through the stock during firing. Her fingers memorized these subtleties, as if the rifle itself were an old friend whispering its secrets. And in her mind, she plotted hypothetical shots across impossible distances, imagining angles, wind changes, and the tiny adjustments required to hit a target that most would deem unreachable. Even when others were restless, she remained serene. She would often sit alone on the base perimeter during sunsets, scanning the horizon, her rifle beside her. The chaos of a military life, the shouting, the drills, the unexpected emergencies barely penetrated her calm. She observed the world not for entertainment, but for insight. The patterns of nature, the movement of birds, the shift of clouds across the sky, all became data points. Every gust of wind, every whisper of temperature change, every subtle shadow on the terrain mattered. Her patience was methodical, almost scientific, and that made her exceptional. Her silence sometimes provoked curiosity and even mockery. Some soldiers assumed that someone so reserved must be inexperienced, weak, or unremarkable. They whispered jokes about her, comparing her to children who liked to play with toys rather than join in serious military drills. But she ignored them. In her mind, time and attention were precious. Wasting energy on petty reactions was beneath her. She preferred to let actions speak for themselves. And actions, as she knew, could leave a far more lasting impression than words ever could. Even her dreams reflected her discipline. At night, she often found herself visualizing long shots in impossible scenarios. Distances that seemed unfathomable to others were routine in her mental exercises. She plotted wind direction, calculated bullet drop, and imagined the recoil pattern as if preparing for missions that might never come. These nightly rituals were more than fantasy. They were preparation, sharpening her intuition, and reinforcing the quiet confidence that defined her. Every imagined shot made her real-world abilities stronger, her instincts more precise. By the time her peers noticed her abilities, it was too late to underestimate her. Her reputation, however quietly earned, was forming like a shadow that could not be ignored. Soldiers who once dismissed her began to watch. Her calm presence, meticulous habits, and razor-sharp instincts hinted at potential that far exceeded ordinary expectations. She wasn't loud, flashy, or boastful, yet she radiated competence. In the coming days, that quiet intensity would draw attention in ways that none of them anticipated. And when the challenge finally arrived, the world around her would have no choice but to acknowledge it. For now, though, she remained in the corner of the armory, cleaning her rifle. A metal gleamed under her careful touch. The smell of gun oil filled the air. The shadows lengthened across the concrete floor, but she barely noticed. Her focus was complete, undisturbed, and absolute. Every soldier on the base, every whisper about her skills, every doubt cast in her direction, none of it mattered. What mattered was mastery. What mattered was patience. What mattered was the quiet power of being prepared when the moment finally demanded excellence. And one day, that moment would arrive. Even though she rarely spoke, her presence began to ripple across the base like an undercurrent, subtle but impossible to ignore. Soldiers who passed her during morning drills would glance sideways, noting the calm precision with which she moved. There was no rush in her steps, no wasted motion. Every turn of her head, every adjustment of her rifle, every measured stride hinted at an extraordinary competence beneath her quiet exterior. It was as if the world had slowed down for her, and she moved through it not as part of the chaos, but alongside it, untouched by distraction, fully aware of every detail. At first, the whispers were nothing more than idle speculation. A few soldiers, curious about her methodical habits, began to murmur in corners. "She's got sharp eyes," one would say. "You ever notice how she can estimate distances just by looking?" Another added. These were casual observations, tossed off in the middle of daily routine. But the whispers multiplied, spreading like sparks through dry grass. They became a quiet chorus that could no longer be ignored. Those who had once dismissed her as a shy, unremarkable figure were beginning to take notice, intrigued by the mystery of her skill. The nature of her talent was subtle but unmistakable. It wasn't raw physical strength or flamboyant heroics that set her apart. It was an almost supernatural precision, a combination of acute observation, relentless practice, and unwavering patience. She could spot tiny irregularities in terrain that others would overlook. She could judge wind shifts before they happened, feeling subtle changes in air pressure against her cheek as she adjusted her stance. And when she trained, her shots, often made in isolation, in silence, were nearly flawless. No applause followed these successes. No one witnessed them except her. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Some soldiers, those with a sharper eye for talent, began to test the theory. During exercises, they would whisper, "Watch her in action," and quietly, without fanfare, she proved them right again and again. Her ability to calculate distance, elevation, and bullet trajectory on instinct left onlookers awestruck. Even the seasoned marksmen on base, who prided themselves on years of experience, began to watch her discreetly. They noted the fluidity of her movements, the calm determination in her eyes, and the absence of hesitation. It was a silent mastery that no amount of arrogance could overshadow. Yet not all reactions were favorable. Human nature being what it is, some soldiers reacted with skepticism or envy. "She's lucky," they said. "Maybe it's a fluke." Others whispered that someone so quiet couldn't possibly be as capable as she appeared. The base, like any tight-knit military community, thrived on reputation and reputation alone. And hers was built quietly, imperceptibly, without the drama that so often accompanies skill. That made her achievements difficult for some to comprehend or accept. In a world where the loudest often dominated attention, she thrived in the shadows, and that frustrated many. Despite the gossip, she paid no attention to it. Rumors, speculation, and envy were distractions she refused to entertain. Her focus remained fixed on her rifle, on the mechanics of her craft, and on honing her abilities in preparation for moments that might never come. And yet, in the quiet of the armory or the isolated stretches of the training grounds, her skill spoke louder than any words ever could. Those who took the time to watch closely, those who observed without judgment, could see it, a precision and control so refined it seemed almost unnatural. The whispers reached the ears of the base's most notorious sniper, a special forces operator with a reputation for arrogance and unbeatable record shots. He had always believed that his skill was unmatched, that no one could rival him. Yet reports, subtle at first, began to reach him. Soldiers mentioned her accuracy, her unusual patience, and the almost obsessive attention she paid to her rifle. At first, he dismissed these accounts with a laugh. How could someone so quiet, so reserved, possibly challenge a seasoned marksman like himself? The idea was absurd. But curiosity gnawed at him. Pride, as always, demanded investigation. He began to observe her discreetly. Hidden behind corners or under the guise of casual patrols, he watched her routines. He noticed the way her eyes tracked distances with uncanny precision. He observed the careful, methodical way she cleaned and calibrated her rifle. Every action was deliberate, a testament to someone who didn't just handle her weapon. She conversed with it, understood it, anticipated its behavior. A seed of respect took root in his mind, entwined with disbelief. There was something different about her, something dangerous. By now, the whispers had reached most of the base. Soldiers who once ignored her had begun to keep a careful distance when she trained, almost in reverence, or perhaps in fear of witnessing skill that far surpassed their own. They spoke quietly among themselves, trying to quantify what they saw. "She's faster with calculations than anyone here," one whispered. "Her aim, it's like she can see the future." Such talk may have sounded fantastical, but anyone who had watched her even once could sense the truth behind it. Her talent was real, undeniable, and rare. Despite growing recognition, she never sought validation. Even when small groups gathered to observe her in secret, she remained absorbed in her own work, unbothered by spectators. To her, approval was irrelevant. Precision and preparation were everything. And in that steadfast dedication lay a quiet strength that was impossible to imitate. It wasn't luck, charm, or bravado that gave her power. It was hours upon hours of solitary work, a relentless focus on mastery, and an ability to remain calm where others faltered. Her skill was the product of patience, and patience was her ally. By the time the Special Forces sniper decided to confront her, the rumors had already built anticipation. The base was buzzing with curiosity. Soldiers whispered about the quiet one, who could calculate impossible shots, who had never boasted, never competed, and yet might surpass the best sniper in their midst. Some doubted, assuming it was hype. Others quietly hoped it was true. Her reputation, though built in silence, now commanded attention, the kind that could challenge ego, provoke awe, and redefine expectations. She herself remained unmoved. Even as soldiers whispered and speculated, she continued her routines with unshakable calm. Her world was one of preparation, of discipline, of anticipation. She did not need recognition. She did not need the whispers to validate her. She knew her capabilities, understood her craft, and awaited the moment when skill, opportunity, and challenge would intersect. And deep down, she sensed that moment was coming. A test not for show, but for proof. That proof would not arrive as subtle whispers or quiet observations. It would arrive loud, impossible to ignore, and it would change everything. She did not fear it. She welcomed it. Her years of preparation, her patience, and her quiet mastery were leading toward a single point in time where all the whispers, all the doubts, all the curiosity would crystallize into a defining moment. And when it came, she would not need words. Her rifle, and the skill honed in silence, would speak for her. The day of reckoning arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly, in the middle of a seemingly ordinary afternoon. The base hummed with the usual rhythm of drills, shouted orders, and distant machinery. But beneath the ordinary, tension had begun to ripple. Soldiers whispered, casting glances toward the armory, where she quietly cleaned her rifle. Rumors had reached the ears of the most notorious sniper on the base, a Special Forces marksman whose reputation for precision was almost legendary. He was known for record-breaking long-distance shots and an ego to match. A man who thrived on the attention and respect others gave freely. He approached her with a swagger designed to intimidate. Every step seemed measured to draw attention, every glance calculated to provoke a reaction. She didn't flinch. She barely looked up, her hands continuing the slow, deliberate movements over the polished metal of her rifle. His eyes, sharp and calculating, narrowed. Soldiers nearby sensed the brewing confrontation, instinctively holding their breath. The sniper's reputation preceded him, and the tension around him thickened the air. For a moment, the base felt suspended, waiting for something monumental to happen. "Quiet little soldier," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I hear you've got a bit of skill. Maybe even enough to surprise someone like me." He let the words hang in the air, a challenge wrapped in mockery. Soldiers turned to watch, intrigued and skeptical. Could she really be as skilled as the whisper suggested? Most expected her to lower her gaze, mumble an apology, or pretend not to hear. After all, she was quiet, reserved, and invisible in most ways. This confrontation seemed designed to confirm what many already assumed: she would falter. But she didn't respond with words. She didn't react with anger or fear. She merely finished the last pass over the rifle with a cloth, wiped her hands clean, and lifted her eyes to meet his. There was no hesitation, no flinch, no acknowledgement of his condescension, just calm, unwavering focus. Her gaze was measured, precise, and impossible to read. It was a look that said, "I know what I can do." And that was enough. The sniper smirked, sensing both the lack of fear and the subtle confidence. "All right," he said, his voice now carrying a mixture of amusement and disbelief. "Let's see how good you really are. I want to see a shot at 3,827 meters. That's right, 3,827 meters. A mile and more. A shot most soldiers would call impossible. And yet," he added with a mocking laugh, "maybe you'll surprise me. Go ahead, take your best shot." The crowd around them gasped. Soldiers whispered among themselves, shaking their heads in disbelief. The distance was almost unthinkable, beyond what most snipers would attempt even in simulations. The physics alone were staggering. Bullet drop, wind drift, humidity, air pressure, even subtle temperature shifts could alter the trajectory dramatically over such a span. Anyone attempting the shot would be venturing into extreme, nearly theoretical territory. It was a challenge designed to embarrass, and yet somehow she remained unshaken. She didn't respond with a word. She simply nodded once, acknowledging the challenge, and began her preparations. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the tension around her. Soldiers whispered in awe and disbelief as she moved with deliberate efficiency, checking the rifle, the scope, and her own stance. Every calculation seemed instinctive, every adjustment a product of years of training and discipline. The sniper, for all his skill and experience, watched intently, recognizing in her movements a precision and confidence that defied expectation. As she approached the firing line, the atmosphere thickened. The soldiers who had once doubted her now leaned in, unable to look away. Even seasoned marksmen held their breath, watching her with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and growing admiration. She set up her position, lying flat on the ground, rifle steadied, scope aligned. Every muscle was controlled, every breath measured. She seemed to merge with her surroundings, a single entity of concentration and discipline. The sniper's smirk faded slightly. He had seen many competent shooters, but something about her presence unsettled him. Not fear, but an undeniable acknowledgement that this was no ordinary soldier. The calculations in her mind ran like clockwork. She accounted for wind speed and direction, bullet drop over the nearly 2.5-mile distance, temperature variations, and even the curvature of the earth. Each factor was cross-referenced with years of experience and mental simulations she had rehearsed countless times. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, steady as the calm before a storm. Around her, the base seemed to fade, leaving only the rifle, the target, and the silent expectation of what was about to unfold. Finally, she exhaled, letting her breath synchronize with the rhythm of the world around her. Time seemed to slow. The sniper, standing nearby, watched with narrowed eyes, sensing the impending inevitability. Soldiers held their breath, as if any sound might disturb the alignment of destiny. Then, with deliberate care, she squeezed the trigger. The sound was almost imperceptible, swallowed by the vastness of the base and the distance the bullet had to travel. All eyes followed the line of sight, waiting for failure. Seconds stretched like hours. The sniper's confidence wavered, soldiers murmured anxiously, and the air itself seemed suspended. Then, a faint, distant ring of steel echoed across the base. A single, crisp clang resonated through the silence. The impossible had been achieved. The bullet had struck the target with precision that defied reason, accuracy over a distance that most had deemed unattainable. The sniper's eyes widened, disbelief etched into his expression. The quiet soldier had done the unimaginable. The base erupted, but not immediately. At first, there was stunned silence. Soldiers stared at one another, processing what they had just witnessed. Whispers turned into awed exclamations. The sniper, momentarily humbled, lowered his head, a rare recognition of excellence replacing his arrogance. The feat was more than skill. It was mastery, born of years of patience, preparation, and quiet determination. What she had accomplished wasn't merely a shot. It was a statement, one that transcended words and left an indelible impression on everyone present. She rolled her shoulders back, calm and composed, her gaze returning to the rifle as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. She hadn't smiled, celebrated, or called attention to herself. She didn't need to. The shot spoke for her. It wasn't about humiliating the sniper, nor about proving her worth to the base. It was about demonstrating the culmination of focus, discipline, and relentless preparation. In that moment, the impossible had become reality, and she had proven, once and for all, that true skill required no audience, no applause, and no ego. Even the sniper, seasoned and prideful as he was, couldn't hide his astonishment. He had challenged her expecting amusement, perhaps a minor embarrassment. Yet he had been met with precision beyond imagination. For a fleeting moment, he recognized the quiet power that had always existed in shadows, unseen and unacknowledged. He understood that in her silence, she had cultivated something stronger than reputation, stronger than bravado, stronger than anyone could anticipate. And in that realization, respect, genuine and profound, took root. The crowd gradually began to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. Soldiers whispered excitedly, their admiration growing as they recalled the countless rumors of her abilities. The whispers that had traveled quietly across the base had been true, yet none had captured the full scope of her skill. She had taken every doubt, every speculation, and transformed them into proof that excellence need not announce itself. The challenge had arrived, and she had met it with composure, mastery, and undeniable talent. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the base, she packed up her rifle with the same deliberate care she had shown from the very beginning. There was no celebration, no fanfare, just quiet satisfaction. The impossible had been accomplished, and her reputation, now cemented, spoke volumes. The whispers of skill had become undeniable truth, and the base, once indifferent or dismissive, now understood that she was a force unlike any other. And in the corner of the armory, once again cleaning her rifle, she allowed herself the smallest, almost imperceptible smile. The challenge had passed, but the work, as always, continued. Preparation, precision, and patience remained her guiding principles. What had happened that day would be remembered, whispered about, and eventually celebrated. Yet she knew, as she always had, that mastery was not about recognition. It was about discipline, dedication, and the quiet pursuit of perfection, a pursuit that would continue long after the echoes of that remarkable shot faded from the base. A morning after the challenge arrived, the base buzzed with an undercurrent of anticipation. Soldiers whispered quietly among themselves, casting furtive glances toward the quiet soldier who had become the center of their curiosity and speculation. She, however, moved with serene purpose, as if none of it concerned her. Her world was methodical, measured, and absolute. Each action she took was deliberate, each motion imbued with intention honed through years of disciplined repetition. Today, she would prepare for what could become the defining moment of her military life. A shot at 3,827 meters, a distance most would call impossible. She began where she always began, with her rifle. It lay disassembled on the armory table, every piece meticulously cleaned, inspected, and polished. She handled it with care bordering on reverence, her fingers gliding over the metal as if memorizing its every nuance. She checked the barrel for microscopic imperfections, cleaned the scope lens until it was perfectly clear, and examined every screw and pin for stability. Her colleagues often wondered why she devoted so much time to what seemed like minute details, but she understood that perfection was built on precision, and precision required obsessive attention. Every adjustment she made was calculated. The tension of the trigger, the alignment of the scope, the calibration of the stock, each detail mattered when attempting a shot of such extreme distance. She had spent countless hours running simulations in her mind, imagining the effect of wind, humidity, temperature, and even the curvature of the Earth on the bullet's trajectory. These factors were invisible to most, yet to her, they were constants that demanded respect and adjustment. She adjusted her rifle and paused to consider the environmental variables, visualizing the bullet's journey across nearly 2.5 miles of open space. After ensuring her rifle was in perfect condition, she moved to the calculations. She had memorized every formula, every correction factor, every environmental coefficient that could affect the outcome. Her mind became a laboratory, methodically working through possibilities, eliminating error with ruthless efficiency. Soldiers passing by would pause, curious to see her concentration, but none could interrupt her. Every thought was focused, every calculation precise. To her, preparation wasn't a task. It was a ritual, a merging of mind, body, and instrument. She measured the wind, holding her hand above the scope to feel the slightest shifts. She noted temperature and humidity, even the angle of the sun, calculating how heat waves might distort the bullet's path. She checked the trajectory repeatedly, refining her adjustments, cross-referencing each element with mental simulations she had rehearsed countless times. It wasn't enough to be good. This shot required near perfection. Failure wasn't merely embarrassing. At this distance, it could prove catastrophic. She could not afford even a single miscalculation. Hours passed as she prepared. She ran through the mental drills again and again, imagining her breathing, heartbeat, and the micro-adjustments required. She visualized the recoil, the subtle sway of the rifle as the bullet left the barrel, the path it would take over terrain stretching for miles. It was a mental choreography, practiced in the stillness of countless nights, rehearsed when no one was watching. She was both conductor and performer, orchestrating a sequence that few could even comprehend. Soldiers who had watched her quietly before now stared, increasingly aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Meanwhile, the Special Forces sniper observed from a distance. His initial arrogance had been tempered by the memory of her previous feats, and now he watched with a mixture of fascination and unease. She was calm, methodical, and terrifyingly precise. The sight unsettled him, not because she intimidated him physically, but because her skill was undeniable and unshakable. His ego, which had once flourished on attention and reputation, found itself challenged by someone whose quiet confidence could not be shaken. Every adjustment she made, every calculation she muttered under her breath, reinforced the reality that this would be no ordinary contest. She prepared not only the rifle, but also herself. Physical conditioning was as critical as mental calculation. She practiced controlled breathing, stabilizing her heart rate and steadying her nerves. Her body was trained to remain motionless under pressure, to maintain absolute stillness for the duration of the shot. Every muscle, every fiber of her being was engaged in silent coordination. She visualized herself lying prone on the ground, rifle aligned, eyes focused, and fingers steady on the trigger. In her mind, the shot was no longer hypothetical. It was inevitable, and she prepared accordingly. She ran through multiple contingency scenarios, anticipating wind gusts, unexpected tremors, and subtle shifts in terrain. Each scenario was carefully considered, with pre-calculated adjustments prepared for each possibility. She thought of the smallest details: the texture of the ground beneath her elbows, the slight pressure of the stock against her shoulder, even the subtle friction of her gloves against the rifle. Every variable was accounted for, and her mind catalogued them meticulously. Preparation, she knew, was not simply about readiness. It was about foresight, imagination, and anticipation. The soldiers around her continued to watch, whispering with growing awe. Some began to realize that what they were witnessing was extraordinary. Years of training, silent observation, and meticulous preparation were converging before their eyes. Even the Special Forces sniper, who had once considered himself untouchable, now understood the depth of her skill. This wasn't luck, instinct, or natural talent alone. It was mastery, honed over countless hours of discipline, patience, and careful calculation. And he, for all his experience, could not help but admire it. By midday, the final preparations were complete. She had calibrated her rifle for the exact distance, verified every calculation, and rehearsed the mental sequence of the shot a dozen times. Her hands, steady and deliberate, fitted the rifle perfectly, her eyes aligning with the scope. She did not rush. She did not fidget. She simply waited for the precise moment to act, fully immersed in her own rhythm of preparation. The air around her seemed charged with anticipation, though she felt nothing but focus. Even as soldiers and observers held their collective breath, she remained composed. The sniper approached, cautiously, respecting her space. For the first time, their eyes met without challenge or mockery, only acknowledgement. He had underestimated her once, and now he could only watch as preparation met precision. This was the moment when preparation would either triumph or falter, and she had left nothing to chance. Years of silent practice, observation, and calculation had led her here. She was ready. Finally, the base quieted, as if the entire world was holding its breath. She lay prone, rifle steady, eyes sharp, and began the final alignment. Every calculation, every adjustment, every breath had brought her to this point. It was more than a test of skill. It was the culmination of years of meticulous work, discipline, and focus. She was prepared, fully aware that the outcome would define her place in the history of her unit. And as her finger hovered over the trigger, she exuded a calm confidence that could not be shaken by doubt, fear, or expectation. The stage was set. The impossible shot loomed ahead, and she had prepared for every variable, every contingency, and every challenge. Nothing in her training, experience, or instinct had been left to chance. The rifle, the calculations, the environment, and her own skill had converged into a single point of readiness. Every observer, including the Special Forces sniper, could feel the tension, the anticipation, the weight of what was about to occur. And in that moment, she was not just a soldier cleaning her rifle. She was a master marksman, ready to demonstrate her extraordinary talent to the world. The morning sun hung low over the base, casting long stretched shadows across the dusty ground. Every soldier on the perimeter seemed to sense that today would not be ordinary. The whispers had grown into anticipation, and every eye followed her movements. She lay prone on the firing line, her rifle steady beneath her. The metal gleamed in the sunlight, clean to perfection, as if reflecting the intensity of her focus. Around her, soldiers held their collective breath. The Special Forces sniper, who had issued the challenge, stood a few yards away, his arms crossed, a mix of disbelief and awe in his eyes. The distance to the target was almost unimaginable, 3,827 meters. The number alone was enough to make even seasoned marksmen shake their heads. At such ranges, countless variables could alter the bullet's trajectory: wind, air pressure, temperature fluctuations, humidity, and even the curvature of the earth. Most shooters would approach such a challenge with trepidation, adjusting repeatedly and praying for luck. She, however, approached it with the methodical confidence of someone who had spent years preparing for this exact moment. Her calm presence radiated control and quiet determination, a stark contrast to the tension surrounding her. She exhaled slowly, feeling the rhythm of her body align with the weapon beneath her. Each muscle was poised, every nerve attuned to the task. Years of training had taught her that the mind and body must function as one. No motion could be wasted, no thought misaligned. She focused on the fundamentals: proper cheek placement, even pressure on the stock, steady grip, and flawless alignment of the scope. Her breathing, once shallow and uneven, now synchronized with her pulse. The rifle became an extension of herself, and the world around her receded into irrelevance. Her eyes scanned the distance, calculating angles, estimating wind shifts, and mentally tracing the bullet's path. She considered the subtle sway of the barrel, under gravity's pull, the friction of the atmosphere, and the effect of heat waves rising from the scorched ground. Every calculation had been rehearsed in her mind countless times, but she treated this moment as if it were unique, because it was. The shot would not tolerate error, hesitation, or distraction. One misjudgment, one tiny oversight, and the impossibility of the distance would assert itself cruelly. The sniper, observing from nearby, shifted slightly. His eyes, trained for precision, followed her movements, noting her preparation. He had underestimated her once, and now he understood that she was a force unlike any other. Her calm intensity unsettled him. It wasn't arrogance or showmanship, but raw, undeniable mastery. He had faced challenging conditions before, but there was a difference here, a combination of patience, calculation, and quiet confidence that even he could not match. For the first time, he questioned whether anyone, no matter how experienced, could ever truly rival her in skill. Around the perimeter, soldiers whispered nervously, unsure whether to expect failure or marvel at the potential triumph. Some tried to avert their gaze, fearing disappointment, while others leaned forward, eyes wide with anticipation. Every movement she made was deliberate, a slow, almost ritualistic process. She adjusted the scope one last time, feeling the subtle shifts in the wind against her cheek, and interpreting them with instinct honed over years of observation. She shifted slightly, aligning herself perfectly, and exhaled and let her mind quiet. The world outside her focus ceased to exist. The moment arrived. Her finger pressed gently against the trigger, steady as a heartbeat. She held it for a fraction longer, ensuring perfect alignment, allowing the rifle and her body to synchronize completely. The soldiers around her seemed frozen in place, collectively holding their breath. The sniper, who had issued the impossible challenge, now watched in awe. For a brief instant, time itself appeared to stretch. The tension in the air was palpable, a living thing that pressed against the senses of every witness. Then, with deliberate care, she squeezed the trigger, The sound was immediate, yet almost imperceptible over the distance. The rifle discharged with a clean, crisp report. Her breathing remained calm, her eyes never leaving the scope. The bullet tore through the air, its trajectory precise, almost predestined. For seconds, the entire base remained in suspended silence, as if holding its collective breath along with her. Soldiers exchanged nervous glances, whispering in disbelief. The sniper's hands twitched slightly, betraying the shock that had begun to settle in his chest. The impossible was in motion, and everyone could feel it. Across the vast expanse of terrain, the bullet carried with unerring accuracy. Each variable she had accounted for, gravity, wind, temperature, friction, had been anticipated and compensated for. The steel target in the distance, nearly invisible to the naked eye, awaited the projectile. Seconds passed like hours. Every heartbeat seemed amplified in the silence. The soldiers' whispers turned into collective anticipation, a held breath that stretched the bounds of belief. And then, the unmistakable sound rang out. Clang! The bullet had struck true. The steel target vibrated under the impact, the sound traveling across the base, reaching every ear. Soldiers froze, disbelief and awe mingling on their faces. The sniper's eyes widened, his usual arrogance replaced by stunned admiration. He stepped closer, slowly lowering his arms, realizing that he was witnessing not luck, not instinct, but pure mastery. The quiet soldier, who had spent years perfecting her craft in isolation, had achieved the impossible. The shot had traveled nearly 2.5 miles with perfect accuracy, and she had executed it flawlessly. The soldiers erupted, but only gradually. First came stunned silence, then murmurs of amazement, then outright exclamations. "Did you see that?" One whispered, She actually did it." Another said. The whispers that had circulated across the base now became shared awe as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. The impossible shot was no longer a rumor, a challenge, or a hypothetical calculation. It was a reality. And the reality was undeniable. She had done what no one thought possible. The sniper approached her, carefully, with a mix of respect and humility. He had issued the challenge intending to test, perhaps even embarrass her. Instead, he had been proven wrong in spectacular fashion. His ego, built on years of flawless shooting and reputation, was humbled by the precision, patience, and discipline she had demonstrated. In her silence, he saw the embodiment of mastery, not boastful, not performative, but absolute, undeniable skill. He extended a hand, a silent gesture of respect that spoke volumes more than any words could. She acknowledged him with a simple nod, never allowing herself the satisfaction of celebration or showmanship. The shot had spoken for her. There was no need for words, no need for applause. Every soldier on the base now understood what whispers had hinted at. She was extraordinary. The impossible had been achieved not through luck or chance, but through preparation, focus, and discipline. Her quiet nature had been her greatest strength, allowing her to train and perfect her craft without distraction or ego. Even as the base slowly returned to its usual rhythm, a moment lingered. Soldiers recounted it in hushed tones, unable to fully comprehend the enormity of what had happened. The sniper, once a figure of untouchable skill, now regarded her with genuine admiration. The lesson was clear. True mastery doesn't demand attention. It earns respect through results. The impossible, when approached with focus and preparation, becomes possible, and she had proven that in the most dramatic, undeniable fashion. As she rolled her shoulders back and prepared to pack away her rifle, the base seemed to exhale collectively. The tension, the disbelief, the awe, all transformed into recognition. She had achieved more than a remarkable feat of marksmanship. She had demonstrated what discipline, patience, and quiet determination could accomplish. The shot had frozen the base not because of spectacle, but because it was flawless. It was precision incarnate, executed with the calm mastery of someone who had devoted herself entirely to her craft. And as she stood, rifle in hand, ready to return to her quiet routine, the whispers of awe became a testament to her skill. She had proven that greatness does not announce itself. It manifests through preparation, focus, and unwavering dedication. Soldiers would remember this moment, recount it, and pass it down as legend. The shot that froze the base was no mere accomplishment. It was a declaration of mastery, achieved not with noise, but with silence, discipline, and unshakable precision. The echoes of the impossible shot still hung in the air like an electric charge. The clang of the steel target reverberated in every corner of the base, lingering in minds and hearts long after the bullet had struck. Soldiers exchanged stunned glances. Their whispers carried equal parts awe and disbelief. Some sank into their knees, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Defeat wasn't just remarkable. It was unfathomable. And at the center of it all stood the quiet soldier, calm as ever, her gaze steady, her movements measured. The Special Forces sniper, the one who had issued the challenge, stood frozen in place. For a long moment, he could not speak, could not even fully register what had occurred. His ego, carefully cultivated over years of flawless marksmanship and legendary reputation, began to crumble before his eyes. He had believed himself untouchable, the epitome of precision and skill. And yet, here she was, a quiet, unassuming soldier, whose methodical preparation, patience, and unwavering focus had achieved what he had considered impossible. He took a step closer, scrutinizing her actions with the critical eye that had always served him well. Normally, he would have expected errors, miscalculations, or hesitation. Yet there was nothing. No tremor, no panic, no misalignment. Every aspect of her performance was flawless. He realized in that moment that he had not been testing her. He had been underestimating her. The realization settled in his chest like a physical weight. She was not merely skilled. She was extraordinary. The full magnitude of her ability struck him, and for the first time, he felt a rare and unsettling humility. As the crowd of soldiers began to murmur among themselves, slowly processing the perfection of the shot, the sniper stood silently, observing the quiet soldier in a new light. His mind, trained to evaluate precision and skill, could not find a single flaw in her technique. Every calculation, every adjustment, every subtle movement had been executed with an elegance that bordered on artistry. He realized that her mastery was not just a product of talent or instinct. It was the culmination of years of preparation, discipline, and quiet observation. The soldier herself remained composed, almost oblivious to the whispers and awe surrounding her. She had done what she had set out to do. The impossible shot had been achieved, and it required nothing more than precision, patience, and focus. She did not seek recognition or applause. She simply understood the weight of the accomplishment. Her work spoke for itself, and it was louder than any words could ever be. That realization struck the sniper more profoundly than any bullet could. She had proven the supremacy of quiet mastery over showmanship. For the first time in his career, the sniper experienced a humbling revelation. He had spent years perfecting his own skills, relying on reputation and ego as both armor and motivation. Yet all of that, no matter how formidable, had been eclipsed by someone who trained in silence, who practiced diligently without attention or validation, and who approached her craft with unwavering patience. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that skill was not merely measured by victories or record shots. It was measured by discipline, focus, and the ability to perform flawlessly when it mattered most. As he processed this, a shift occurred within him. His ego, though bruised, was giving way to respect. He studied her movements again, noting the meticulous way she reassembled her rifle after the shot, the calm precision of her posture, and the serene focus in her eyes. There was no arrogance, no posturing, only mastery. Every instinct he had honed over years was now being challenged, not by force or volume, but by the quiet strength of a soldier who refused to be distracted by recognition or noise. The sniper understood that he was witnessing something rare, a true master at work. Around the base, whispers transformed into tentative admiration. Soldiers who had once doubted her abilities now spoke of her in hushed reverence. She did it, one said, shaking his head. No one else could have made that shot. Another added, she's not just skilled. She's legendary. These murmurs were not idle exaggerations. Everyone who had witnessed the shot, or even glimpsed the precision of her preparation, understood that what had occurred was extraordinary. The impossible had been made possible, and it was done not with noise, but with calm, deliberate mastery. The sniper, still standing a few yards away, finally spoke, quietly, respectfully, and without his usual bravado. I underestimated you, he admitted, his voice carrying an honesty that few had ever heard from him. I thought I was the best. I thought no one could challenge me. But you've proven otherwise. There was no sarcasm, no condescension, only a genuine acknowledgement of her skill. He extended his hand, an unspoken gesture of respect and recognition. She accepted it with a simple nod, her calm demeanor unshaken, understanding that no words were necessary. He reflected on his own journey as a marksman. He had spent years building skill, reputation, and ego in tandem, often seeking recognition for each achievement. Yet here was someone who had achieved mastery without any of those distractions. Her skill was pure, untarnished by ego or spectacle. He realized that his perception of greatness had been incomplete. True mastery did not demand attention. It earned respect silently, through performance, precision, and dedication. And she had done just that, flawlessly, on the grandest possible scale. The base began to normalize, though the memory of the shot lingered. Soldiers recounted the moment repeatedly, sharing it with one another, ensuring that it would become legend. They described her calm demeanor, her flawless execution, and the impossibility of the distance she had conquered. And through every retelling, the sniper remained, reflecting on what he had witnessed. He had been challenged, not by arrogance or volume, but by quiet excellence, and he had been humbled. The realization reshaped his understanding of skill, patience, and the quiet power of mastery. As she cleaned her rifle once more, the sniper studied her from a distance. He noticed details that others might have missed. The precision in her hand movements, the calm in her breathing, the way her eyes reflected focus rather than self-consciousness. Every element of her demeanor reinforced the truth he had come to understand. She was extraordinary, not by luck, not by boast, but by relentless preparation, patience, and unwavering commitment to excellence. And in that realization, a subtle shift occurred within him, a deep, lasting respect that could not be undone. He recalled every challenge he had faced in his career, every mark he had earned, every accolade he had received. None of them compared to the quiet mastery he now observed before him. He realized that talent alone was insufficient. It required discipline, patience, and focus, virtues she embodied in abundance. And as he watched her return to her calm routine, the sniper understood that true skill, when executed without ego or distraction, could leave an indelible impression far more powerful than any boast, any record, or any display of bravado. The whispers among the soldiers evolved into awe. The quiet one, once underestimated, had become the standard against which they would measure excellence. She had achieved what few could imagine, and had done so without ceremony, spectacle, or prideful display. Every observer recognized that this was a defining moment, a turning point in the story of the base, the unit, and the soldier herself. And through it all, she remained serene, focused, and prepared for whatever came next, knowing that mastery was not about recognition, but about the relentless pursuit of perfection. Even the sniper, seasoned, prideful, and confident as he had always been, had learned something profound. Humility could emerge not from failure, but from witnessing greatness in another. Her precision, calm, and preparation had shifted his understanding of skill forever. The quiet soldier had achieved the impossible, and in doing so, had reshaped the perception of what excellence truly meant. And as the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the base, a silent realization settled over everyone who had witnessed the moment. The quiet soldier's legacy had already begun. Not because of words, recognition, or fanfare, but because of her skill, patience, and the flawless execution of a feat so extraordinary that it would be remembered for years to come. The impossible shot had become the defining moment of the base. The quiet soldier, once underestimated, had executed with flawless precision a feat that even seasoned marksmen considered beyond reach. Yet she remained calm, composed, and unassuming, as though the world had not changed at all. While the soldiers around her buzzed with awe, her focus was already shifting to preparation, discipline, and constant improvement. For her, mastery was never about recognition. It was about the relentless pursuit of excellence, silently perfected over years of patient dedication. The atmosphere on the base had shifted. Soldiers who had once whispered doubts about her now regarded her with reverence. Even those who had initially mocked her quiet demeanor now realized the depth of her capabilities. Her peers began to approach her, hesitating at first, unsure how to bridge the distance between admiration and awe. Conversations that had once been casual banter about drills and routines now turned to her remarkable skill. Soldiers sought her advice, hoping to learn from someone whose expertise had been proven in the most extraordinary way. The Special Forces sniper, once arrogant and unchallenged, now stood in a rare position, humbled and contemplative. He had issued a challenge, expecting to affirm his superiority, and instead had witnessed a display of unparalleled precision and calm. His respect for her grew with every interaction that followed. He began to study her methods, observing her preparation routines, her meticulous adjustments, and her unparalleled focus. He recognized that her skill was not born of chance, but of disciplined training, constant observation, and relentless self-improvement. In her quiet, methodical way, she had taught him a lesson that no classroom or drill could ever replicate. Over the following days, the base experienced a subtle but profound transformation. Soldiers adjusted their routines, taking cues from her methodical habits. Early mornings found teams practicing precision and patience rather than rushing through exercises. Discussions about strategy shifted from boastful claims to detailed analysis and calculation. Even the instructors noted a change in attitude. The quiet soldier's example had raised the bar for the entire unit, proving that excellence was not measured by noise or recognition, but by skill, preparation, and composure under pressure. Despite the newfound attention, she remained grounded. She continued her routines with the same quiet discipline she had always exhibited, cleaning her rifle, calculating distances, observing subtle environmental changes. These acts, which once seemed ordinary, now carried an aura of significance. Soldiers watched and learned, not merely because she had achieved the impossible, but because she embodied a philosophy of preparation, patience, and relentless focus. Her influence spread without her having to speak a single boastful word. The sniper began to see her not just as a competitor, but as a mentor in a sense. Though he had once been unmatched, he now sought to understand the quiet mastery she displayed. He observed her every movement, the care with which she handled her rifle, the precision of her calculations, the way she controlled her breathing and steadied her pulse. It became clear to him that mastery was more than talent. It was discipline, perseverance, and an unyielding commitment to improvement. Her example redefined the standards he had always applied to himself and others. The soldiers themselves began to emulate her methods. Tactical drills incorporated her focus on precision and patience. Observations became more analytical, and attention to detail became a priority rather than an afterthought. Where before the base had been a place of routine, it now became a laboratory of excellence, inspired by one quiet soldier whose skill had reshaped the perception of what was possible. The whispers that had once circulated about her abilities now became lessons and guiding principles for every member of the unit. Yet she never sought recognition. Even as respect and admiration grew, she remained focused on preparation and practice. There was no celebration in her demeanor, no display of triumph. She understood that skill and mastery were their own reward, and that every accomplishment was simply a step toward the next challenge. The impossible shot, extraordinary as it was, did not mark an endpoint. It was part of an ongoing journey, one defined by discipline, attention to detail, and quiet determination. The sniper, now a close observer, realized that her influence extended far beyond the mechanics of shooting. Her composure, focus, and methodical approach were lessons in leadership and character. Soldiers watched not just what she did with a rifle, but how she conducted herself under pressure, how she approached every task with precision and patience. Her example demonstrated that true respect is earned not through noise, ego, or superficial achievement, but through consistent excellence and unwavering dedication. Even commanding officers took notice. Reports of her feats circulated through the chain of command, accompanied by careful observations of her training methods and influence on her peers. Recommendations for commendations and awards were made, but she accepted them with quiet humility, never drawing attention to herself. For her, the acknowledgement of skill was secondary to the discipline and preparation that had enabled it. She continued to work, to practice, to refine, understanding that mastery is a journey rather than a destination. As days turned into weeks, her legend solidified. Soldiers recounted the impossible shot with reverence, and her methods became the standard by which excellence was measured. The sniper, once arrogant, now spoke of her with a mixture of admiration and humility, recognizing that she had not only challenged him, but reshaped his understanding of skill. Her quiet influence permeated the base, transforming its culture, raising standards, and inspiring every soldier to strive for mastery in their own way. Through it all, she remained the same quiet soldier who had first drawn attention through her meticulous care of her rifle. She did not boast, did not seek the spotlight, and did not allow admiration to alter her focus. Her respect was earned not by display or ego, but by action, preparation, and consistent excellence. The soldiers, the instructors, and even the seasoned sniper all learned that true mastery commands attention, not through noise, but through undeniable, disciplined achievement. Her impact reached far beyond the base itself. Stories of the impossible shot, of the quiet soldier who had executed it flawlessly, began to circulate through other units. Soldiers from distant bases spoke in hushed tones of her precision and discipline. What had once been whispers became legends, and the lessons she embodied, patience, preparation, focus, were carried far beyond the place where she had first proven herself. Her reputation became an example of excellence in its purest form, earned, not announced, demonstrated, not claimed. In the quiet of the armory, as she cleaned her rifle once again, the weight of respect surrounded her, though she did not acknowledge it outwardly. She understood that mastery is silent, that influence is often felt more profoundly than it is observed, and that respect is earned through discipline and consistent excellence. The soldiers, the sniper, and her peers all recognized her as a model of achievement. But she remained focused, ready for whatever challenge might come next. Her work, her preparation, and her precision were ongoing, a continuous journey that would define her for years to come. And as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the base, her quiet presence spoke louder than any words, louder than any accolade, louder than any admiration. The impossible had been achieved, respect had been earned, and the legend of the soldier who had conquered the impossible shot had begun to take root. But for her, it was simply another day of preparation, another opportunity to refine her skills, and another reminder that mastery is never complete. It is a journey defined by patience, focus, and unwavering discipline. The impossible shot had faded from the air, leaving only echoes of awe and admiration, but its impact on the base endured. Soldiers who had once doubted her abilities now moved with a quiet reverence, their routines forever influenced by the example she had set. Even weeks later, whispers of the feat could be heard in barracks, mess halls, and training grounds. She had demonstrated that precision, patience, and preparation were more powerful than noise, bravado, or ego. And although the story of that single flawless shot had become legend, her influence went far deeper than the memory of that day. The Special Forces sniper, who had issued the challenge in a mixture of doubt and pride, had undergone a personal transformation. His ego, once insatiable, had been tempered by humility. He now studied her methods, absorbing lessons not only in marksmanship, but in composure, preparation, and discipline. In her silence, he realized that greatness need not announce itself. It only needed to manifest through results. He began to mentor younger soldiers differently, emphasizing patience, precision, and methodical practice, all inspired by the quiet soldier who had challenged his assumptions and redefined what excellence could look like. Word of her achievements spread beyond the confines of the base. Reports traveled up the chain of command, eventually reaching high-ranking officers who recognized the rarity of her skill. Military analysts studied her performance, impressed not only by the impossible distance of her shot, but by her meticulous preparation and unwavering calm. She became a model of modern marksmanship, the embodiment of skill developed through diligence rather than ego. Her legacy, once private and solitary, was now publicly acknowledged as an example for all soldiers, male and female, who aspired to excellence. Yet she remained unchanged by recognition. Unlike others who might have reveled in fame, she continued to rise before dawn, meticulously clean her rifle, and run through the mental calculations and physical conditioning that had defined her career. She did not seek accolades or headlines. She sought mastery, and in doing so, she demonstrated the quiet truth of her philosophy. Skill and discipline are their own rewards, and greatness is measured by preparation and execution, not applause. Soldiers admired her not for fame, but for the authenticity and rigor of her approach. Over time, she became a mentor in her own right, though not through speeches or instruction. Instead, she led by example, demonstrating through her routine, focus, and precision what true mastery required. Younger soldiers watched her quietly, absorbing lessons in patience, concentration, and meticulous preparation. The impossible shot, which had frozen the base and reshaped perceptions of her abilities, became a teaching tool. Observing her, soldiers learned that even the most formidable challenges could be overcome with preparation, calm, and focus. Her legend inspired not only awe but tangible improvement in the skills of those around her. The sniper, now a student in her quiet mastery, often followed her during drills and practice sessions. He asked questions, watched silently, and learned from her precision, her patience, and her unwavering dedication. Through her example, he gained insights into focus and discipline that could not be taught in any classroom or briefing. In turn, he became a more effective mentor to others, translating her methods into lessons that could be shared throughout the unit. Through this cycle of observation and application, her legacy extended far beyond a single impossible shot. It began to reshape the culture of the base itself. Her influence extended beyond technical skill. She taught, indirectly, lessons about humility, persistence, and respect. Soldiers who had once been competitive, boastful, or impatient began to mirror her approach. Preparation before action, observation before reaction, and patience before impulse. The base, once a place of routine, transformed into a laboratory of precision and focus. Soldiers began to understand that mastery was not a destination, but a journey, and that greatness was achieved quietly, through diligence and commitment rather than noise and spectacle. Despite her growing legend, she remained grounded. Recognition and respect did not alter her routine. Each morning, she awoke before dawn, cleaned her rifle with meticulous care, and ran through the physical and mental exercises that had prepared her for the impossible shot. The rituals she had followed for years, the focus, the patience, a careful calculation of variables, continued without change. She understood that mastery is not static. It requires constant attention, adaptation, and refinement. And in this unchanging pursuit, she found satisfaction far greater than any accolades or admiration. The base itself began to commemorate her achievements in subtle ways. Soldiers would leave notes of encouragement or reminders of lessons learned, hidden in training manuals or tucked into equipment, as if sharing her philosophy through small gestures. Stories of her impossible shot were recounted with reverence during downtime, not as tales of heroics, but as examples of what discipline and patience could achieve. She became a benchmark, the quiet standard of excellence against which others measured their performance and ambition. Her influence was pervasive, though invisible to those who did not look closely. For the Special Forces sniper, the lesson was profound and personal. He had faced countless challenges, achieved record-breaking shots, and held an untouchable reputation. Yet the quiet soldier had changed his understanding of skill and mastery. She had shown that precision and excellence are cultivated through preparation, patience, and disciplined focus, and that even the most confident expert can learn humility from observing true mastery. His admiration became respect, and his respect became a dedication to emulate the principles she embodied. Even years later, the memory of the impossible shot remained a defining moment for the base. New soldiers learned the story as part of their orientation, and seasoned veterans recalled it with reverence. The quiet soldier's discipline, precision, and calm composure became a model for every recruit and every instructor. Her methods were not simply technical. They were philosophical, embodying the principles of patience, preparation, and the relentless pursuit of mastery. Soldiers came to understand that true greatness is earned through effort, focus, and humility, and that these values endure far beyond a single moment of achievement. And yet, despite all the recognition, she never claimed the spotlight. She did not seek to be famous, celebrated, or idolized. Her focus remained on preparation, discipline, and continual improvement. She knew that mastery is not measured by applause, but by consistency, by the ability to perform flawlessly when it matters most, and by the impact one leaves on those who observe and learn from it. Her legacy, therefore, was not just the impossible shot, but the countless lessons imparted silently through example, inspiring a culture of excellence that would endure for generations. In the quiet of the armory, as she carefully cleaned her rifle one last time for the day, soldiers paused to watch. Some approached to ask questions. Others simply observed in silence, absorbing the discipline she displayed. The Special Forces sniper, now a devoted student of her methods, nodded in quiet admiration. The impossible shot, the lessons learned, and the respect earned were all part of a larger story, one of patience, preparation, and unshakable focus. The legend of the quiet soldier was secured not through noise or ego, but through mastery, discipline, and the enduring power of example. The base, the soldiers, and the sniper all understood the truth. Excellence is silent, influence is subtle, and mastery is earned through patience and preparation. She had achieved the impossible, reshaped perceptions, and left a legacy that would guide and inspire generations. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, warm shadows across the base, she continued her quiet routine, proving that greatness is not celebrated in words, but embodied in action, precision, and relentless dedication. Her story, now legend, would be told for decades, not as a tale of fame, but as a blueprint of discipline, patience, and unwavering mastery. And in every telling, every lesson learned, and every soldier inspired, her legacy would live on, quiet, powerful, and enduring.